I now pronounce you spouses for life.
U.S. Supreme Court will take up the question of same-sex marriage this spring and decide whether it should be legal across the U.S. Good evening, I'm Dwayne Brown. That story coming up on KPBS Evening Edition. Also tonight, we just closed the 2014 election cycle, but the Republican Party is announcing plans for the next presidential race. And we'll tell you why California is on the hook for more than $400 million in vacation pay. We'll also take a look at why a bumper crop of pot growers is causing some hiccups in Washington State's cannabis economy.
And should San Diego taxpayers fund a new Charger stadium? I'm Peggy Pico with what's next after the mayor's demand for a plan. Then,
that day at Midway, 6 minutes changed the world.
a new documentary about the Battle of Midway debuts in a new theater on the USS Midway Museum in San Diego. What's different about this movie?
And the San Diego Museum, celebrating cultural diversity, makes a comeback after shutting its doors during the Great Recession. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. U.S. Supreme Court says it will decide this term whether same-sex couples across the nation have a constitutional right to marry. In April, the justices will hear an appeal of a lower court ruling upholding same-sex marriage bans in 4 states. Now, a decision is expected in June. The justices will decide 2 questions: whether the 14th Amendment requires states to allow these marriages and whether it requires them to recognize marriages performed in other states. Of course, California is one of 36 states where same-sex marriage is now legal, but there haven't been any court rulings for the entire nation. The Republican Party will start its presidential primary debates in just 7 months. The announcement came at the Republican National Committee's winter meeting held here, actually in Coronado. California will be the second stop on the debate tour sometime in September. Now, there are no specifics yet on when and where. The RNC does plan 9 primary debates, far fewer than in 2012. And former presidential candidate Mitt Romney closes out the RNC meeting at 7 tonight with remarks at the Midway Museum along the Embarcadero. He's reportedly considering another White House run. Aides say he's working on a platform with 3 priorities: making the world safer, helping the middle class, and combating poverty. This week, San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer renewed his commitment to build a new Charger football stadium. Peggy Pico takes a look at what's next.
Charger owner Alex Spanos says the team will stay in San Diego for the 2015 season, but made no promises for beyond that. Meanwhile, Mayor Faulconer says he wants to get a ballot measure for the new stadium before voters in 2016. Joining me with how this might play out are my guests, Jay Paris, sports writer and host at Mighty 1090 Radio, and KPBS News and digital editor Laura Wingard. And Jay, so if the Chargers don't get a new stadium, how likely is it that they're going to leave?
Well, I think it's any good businessman has a couple plans, and their plan is to stay in San Diego. But if that doesn't happen, they'd be foolish not to try to get a piece of that L.A. market or to move somewhere where their franchise would go up. Let's face it, playing in that stadium, they're undervalued as it is, and if they went somewhere else, they'd be worth more money. And
just briefly, the places that they're talking about or been rumored is L.A. and where else?
It's mostly Los Angeles. There's 3 sites up there that have been identified, and here recently the Hollywood Park side is really picking up traction.
We'll have to follow that.
Yes,
now, Laura, the push for this new Charger stadium is nothing new. It's been going on for 13 years or so. How is the mayor's task force for a plan this time different from all the other ones?
Well, you know, I think most people are comparing it to the one in 2002, which Dick Murphy created when he was mayor. And we won't know until Kevin Faulconer announces who's on it. But, you know, it's a citizens committee. They look at it. They're supposed to come up with a plan. That's what Mayor Faulconer said. He wants to know how it's going to be financed and where it's going to be built, either downtown in the East Village or at the current Qualcomm Stadium. The task force in 2002 did the same thing, and at that time it was to keep it in Qualcomm.
Any guesses as to who might be on this committee? We've asked and nobody has any idea.
I don't know who they'll pick. I mean, the last one had people from the tourism community. It was led by a respected land use attorney. I would assume that, the people that are involved and, who will benefit from a Charger stadium, there's going to be a lot of business people on it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Good point. Now, Jay, give us a sense, if you would, for people who haven't been in a while, what is the state of the Qualcomm Stadium like right now?
They opened it before we landed on the moon. So that about sums it up.
It was called something else back
yes,
then,
it was
right.
San Diego Stadium, then
right.
Jack Murphy Stadium, now Qualcomm Stadium. It's when the Spanos go around to other games on the road, they get stadium envy, no matter where they go, because every other place, maybe not Oakland Stadium, but every other place, it looks better than Qualcomm. The video board's outdated, the pipes are leaking. It's just not a lot of creature comfort stuff for people who are paying top dollar for ticket now.
Right. And are there have either of you heard, are there any safety issues? Because one time I was there, I literally saw a chunk of concrete fall down.
Well, that's happened a few years ago. It was kind of famous. There was a storm that day, which doesn't happen all the time, and it was so flooded. People were having to kind of lift their legs, and the water was rushing through the aisles. So, and that caused electrical problems and things like that. And of course, it was on national TV.
Right. And Laura, I want to ask about this. So, the campaign, as I said, the mayor said while he was campaigning, he would not use taxpayer money for a new stadium, as did everybody running for mayor at the time. But now he says, quote, it needs to be a fair deal for taxpayers. What does that mean?
Well, it's how you define taxpayer money. And I think that happens across the country when these stadiums are being built. One thought that has been kicked around a lot is Qualcomm Stadium is on 166 acres. It's prime real estate in Mission Valley. It's owned by the city. Do you sell part of that off, develop it, build a park along the San Diego River, and use maybe the revenues from those sales or leases and things like that to fund a stadium somewhere else? So is that taxpayer money? Some people would say yes. If you're going to sell that, it should go back to the general fund.
Back to the general fund.
So that's kind of, it's how you define taxpayer funds.
All right. We'll be talking about that for a while. But Jay, I want to end on this because there is some other sports news in town. The Padres are going to host the All-Star game. Tell us what that means.
Yeah, it's a big plum for the Padres, and it kind of really shows the culture change that's going on down there since really this offseason. Be the third game in San Diego, but the first at Petco Park, and it's going to give them a chance to not only show off that beautiful venue down there, but San Diego as well. So middle of summertime, the weather will be great. It's going to be a good time for the San Diego, really.
So we have a couple things to look forward to. Jay Ferris, Laura Wingard, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Federal prosecutors in San Diego have unsealed indictments against top leaders of the Sinaloa drug cartel. The charges stem from an investigation that began in National City and Chula Vista. 60 people are accused of smuggling methamphetamine, cocaine, and other drugs into the U.S. Prosecutors say it's the most significant case since the dismantling of the Arellano Felix drug cartel. A man who murdered his estranged wife, at San Diego City College has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The body of 19-year-old Diana Gonzalez was found in a campus bathroom in 2010. Her husband, Armando Perez, was a fugitive for nearly 2 years and was arrested in Tijuana. He pleaded guilty the day the opening arguments in his trial were set to begin. Testimony began today in a revenge porn case here in San Diego. Kevin Bollard is accused of posting thousands of nude photos of women on a website and demanding money to take the pictures down. California may have to hire more state workers because some of its employees stockpiled too much vacation time. There is a cap of 80 days, but it wasn't enforced during the budget crisis when workers were laid off or furloughed. Those who remain skipped vacation to make sure services were still available. Now, the state has a $447 million liability in stockpiled vacation pay. But Controller Betty Yee says the money only has to be paid out when workers leave their jobs.
Not everyone's going to leave state service tomorrow, and so even though it may be a huge liability on the books, we don't expect that we're going to have this huge payout overnight. And over time, I hope that we can really, one, be able to enforce the cap, and two, as we really even out the workload being covered, that our employees can work down that leave time.
More than 35,000 state workers went over the 80-day cap. They're being urged to take their vacation time, and some departments may have to hire more folks to cover them. A long-running fight to create a new state of Jefferson now has support from voters in 5 Northern California counties. They're petitioning Sacramento lawmakers for the right to form a 51st state. Backers of the idea say as things stand now, they're not getting equal representation.
The whole northern third of California has a total, depending on where you divide it, but the best case scenario, we have a total of 3 Assembly and 3 Senate representatives here in the Capitol. Los Angeles County alone has 35 representatives. So our voice doesn't matter here. It doesn't matter who we put into office. Our voice doesn't count.
They also say state regulations are hurting Northern California industries like logging and mining. Any move to split the state has to be approved by the legislature as well as Congress. Eight San Diego companies are getting a combined $2 million in tax credits through the California Competes program. It awards businesses who expand and create jobs in the state. 584 jobs are projected for San Diego. The program is awarding $30 million in credits statewide, with more than 4,000 new jobs projected. A week after closing hundreds of stores, teen clothing retailer The Wet Seal has filed for bankruptcy. The company closed 3 of its 4 stores here in the county. Wet Seal says it's getting hurt by lower-priced fashion options, and teens are more interested in new gadgets than new jeans. A study says California doctors use a loophole to raise drug prices. It allows their payments to go up by as much as 400%. Researchers say many states adopted restrictions to reduce prescription costs, including California, but doctors have found ways to get around it. A new Senate report urges reform and support for the state's aging and disabled adults. More than 12 million people age 65 and older live in California, and the number is expected to grow to 18 million within 15 years.
We're going to have a whole bunch of folks out there not knowing what to do and floundering for survival, etc. Homelessness and all the other kinds of social ills become much greater and much more expensive if we don't do this more up front.
Some of the problems described in the report: growing gaps in the workforce needed to care for the state's aging population, and a need for more cultural competency for medical services used by older adults. Marijuana advocates are gearing up to get legalization on the California ballot in 2016, following 4 other states who've already voted to make pot legal. Now, one of those states is Washington, and last year its legal marijuana market opened with a short supply. Not anymore. Now growers say there's too much pot. The AP's Robert Bumstead shows us what it means for the cannabis economy.
Production at this Washington state marijuana farm is humming. Pioneer Production and Processing outside of Seattle produces 25 pounds of the drug every 10 days. But for now, that may be too much marijuana.
There's a price war out there.
When the legal marijuana market opened 6 months ago, stores routinely closed because there wasn't enough inventory. Now there's a bottleneck of pot waiting to be sold.
We're already seeing people making, hard moves to figure out one way or another how to survive in this.
Producers say the slow openings of retail stores and a big fall harvest have flooded the system. And with about 300 growers to the less than 100 stores open statewide, much of the 31,000 pounds harvested sit in warehouses.
People fail in business all the time. Not that we want to see anybody fail. That just is the reality of economics.
In Colorado, the other state with legal marijuana sales, there are more restrictions on production. Washington caps how much pot farmers can grow, but not the number of growers.
And part of the issue is you have people that are really good at growing marijuana, not really good at running a business.
The oversupply of pot means prices are starting to come down, but not enough to compete with the still largely unregulated medical marijuana and black markets. While growers wait for more stores to open, a young industry is left with serious growing pains. Robert Bumstead, Associated Press.
The mayor's wish list: street repairs, more jobs, and a bigger convention center. But what do we have so far? Another stadium task force. And the Sheriff's Department says it's arresting people before they commit serious crimes. Join us for the KPBS Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
AAA is giving its 5 Diamond Award to 4 San Diego area hotels and 1 restaurant. The list includes the Grand Del Mar and its Addison restaurant, the Lodge at Torrey Pines, the Park Aviera, and the Rancho Valencia Resort and Spa. The 5 Diamond rating recognizes businesses who give guests highly personalized luxury experiences. This weekend marks a reawakening for San Diego's New Americans Museum in Point Loma. It shut its doors several years ago during the Great Recession. Now it's back in business at Liberty Station, celebrating the contributions immigrants have made to our nation's history.
Voy a contar una historia.
Bright colors, lush landscapes, and stories of survival.
Un lunes 5 de marzo este año.
Triumph, and creating change through art. It's not your typical museum by design, says Executive Director Linda Caballero Sotelo, but the issues of displacement and rebuilding of homes and lives are common to all immigrants.
And you'll be able to walk through moments of time, contemporary times, with a multimedia exhibition that has video and an installation and light boxes that'll speak to different generations. And then you'll be able to come across the way to the other gallery and see the work of these beautiful tapestries.
15 hand-woven tapestries came from the museum's founder, Deborah Zeke. She was moved by the strength of the people of a small community near Bogota, Colombia, where soldiers seemed to be moving them off the land, and what eventually happened to them.
This is a museum of living people, living, working, thriving, and trying to bring in a diversity and to connect them in every way we can.
More than 40 million foreign-born people currently live in the U.S., and San Diego is one of the most ethnically diverse places in the nation, with more than 100 different languages spoken here.
I would love for folks to feel a sense that they're connected, universal theme, that there's something about the things they see today and in the next 3 months that speaks to them, and we believe it will.
It's an exciting, for me, very exciting time for this long-awaited reawakening.
Ya son mías, sí, señor.
The museum's latest exhibits open to the public this weekend at Liberty Station, with plans for 3 more exhibitions throughout the year. A new movie theater just opened aboard the USS Midway Museum downtown. Peggy Pico has a preview of what's showing at the 90-seat theater.
Just 6 months after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, the Battle of Midway was considered a pivotal turning point in the U.S. winning World War II. Joining me with more on the new film about the battle is my guest, Scott McGaugh of the USS Midway Museum. And Scott, let's start with this 90-seat theater now. Where is it, and why have a theater on a battleship?
Well, I tell you, it's on the hangar deck right at the entrance to the museum. It has been 5 years in the making, and the reason why it exists, Peggy, is because we listened to our guests. They asked whether Midway was at the Battle of Midway. In fact, it was named for the Battle of Midway at the end of World War II and actually missed the war by a week. Voices of Midway really tells the story of 6 minutes that changed the course of the war in the Pacific, and this is our opportunity to preserve that legacy of the greatest generation for future generations.
And you know, I called it a battleship mistakenly. It is an aircraft carrier.
Indeed.
I do know that. How unusual is it to have a theater on an aircraft carrier?
It's the only one that we're aware of. It took us a long time, longer than it took to fight World War II, actually, to get it all put together. Back in the 1940s, they weren't anticipating when they built Midway that we would have a contemporary theater. So there was a great deal of restoration work, preparation work done by volunteers, San Diegans, to make the theater possible.
And now this film, as you say, Voices of Midway, the title of it is about the battle on request from visitors. How is this film different than other films about the Midway?
It is very much focused on the boiler tenders, the stewards, and not just the aviators, the young 19 and 20-year-olds who weren't just above in the skies, but down below decks, who fought and sacrificed so much. It's told from their perspective. In addition, it's a 14-minute film that blends holographic narrators. So Admiral Chester Nimitz is going to walk out in the audience, if you will, as part of the story. So it's very personal. It's very, very emotional.
And I understand producers use letters and interviews from World War II veterans who fought in the battle. Let's take a look.
That day at Midway, 6 minutes changed the world.
Aye, aye, Captain. We'll do whatever we can to keep her in the fight.
Tell them how hard we're all working and that you love them.
Commander Walker, get your nose up.
So some historic footage that we saw there. Now, the USS Midway was not actually in the Battle of Midway, but it was named after it. Some of the museum's docents, I understand, are veterans of World War II. What is their reaction to the film?
They are inspired by it. They are so dedicated to preserving, again, the legacy of all those who serve across all wars and conflicts and in between wars. And for them to be able to share in an even more personal way, some of them are World War II veterans. What they remember, what was for them yesterday. With young men and women today, boys and girls, future generations, they're inspired, they're humbled, sometimes emotional.
Okay. The Midway Museum is recently ranked among the top museums in the country. Why do you think it continues to attract so many visitors every year?
Our docents. Midway is a very interactive, personal experience. It's not something where you stand back and look at things. You get into aircraft and get into cockpits. You talk with docents who were there, who flew off the flight deck in Vietnam or even shortly after World War II. So it's a very interpersonal, family-oriented approach to a museum, and we took that same approach in the theater. Instead of a History Channel version of statistics and hardware, it's all about the people.
So if you could just name for us, for people who haven't been, a few of the exceptional exhibits or walking through as you're walking through what is an enormous ship.
It is. It was the largest ship in the world for a decade. Average length of stay now for our visitors is about 4 hours because we're still adding things literally every year. But to explore an engine room, many decks below water, and listen to a docent explain what life was like down there, to explore a city at sea, 4,200 19-year-olds on average, operating a city so that the pilots could fly. And then, of course, the flight deck. You've got to spend some time up there. It really is a remarkable experience.
Well, so much to see. Scott McGaugh, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I want to let folks know that the documentary Voices of Midway is now showing aboard the new Battle of Midway Theater aboard the USS Midway. Admission to the film is included in museum ticket prices. For more information, go to kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. Shields and Brooks, plus why Wyoming is at loggerheads with the EPA over coal production in the state. That's Friday on the PBS News Hour.
Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. is being remembered across the nation this weekend here in San Diego. It started with an early morning celebration. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler says it echoed Dr. King's message of unity and hope.
The YMCA of San Diego County's 30th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Human Dignity Award breakfast felt like a party. Politicians from all over the county were there, and San Diego County Community College District Chancellor Constance Carroll was honored with this year's Human Dignity Award.
Dr. Carroll, thank you for everything you do for our community. We are honored.
But they say it's Dr. King's inspirational message that matters.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
Ben Kelso, president of the San Diego Black Police Officers Association, says every day he tries to live up to the example Dr. King set.
But to build coalitions and support to achieve diversity. And I'm here today trying to continue that same sort of work.
Jesus Castillas' company has been doing maintenance at the Jackie Robinson YMCA for about 10 years. He sees Dr. King in the eyes of every child.
This is good because of the fact that it keeps the kids, doing something. It keeps them out of drugs. It helps. It helps.
Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Well, if you've got a 3-day weekend ahead, you'll have nice weather for it. Coastal temperatures in the upper 60s, low 70s with a mix of sun and clouds. For the inland valleys, mid-70s, maybe a bit cloudy on Martin Luther King Day. And look for mid-60s in the mountains with plenty of sunshine. As for the desert, upper 70s right through the holiday weekend. Let's recap our top stories tonight. Supreme Court has agreed to decide whether same-sex couples nationwide have a constitutional right to marry. The justices will review a lower court ruling upholding bans in 4 states. The case will be argued in April, and a decision is expected by late June. A primary debate schedule was announced today at the Republican National Committee meeting held right here in Coronado. GOP candidates will face off in just 7 months. California will be the second stop on the debate tour sometime in September. The RNC plans 9 primary debates, far fewer than in 2012. And former presidential candidate Mitt Romney closes out the RNC meeting shortly with remarks tonight at the Midway Museum. He's reportedly considering another White House run. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.